Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly conversation about things that matter to us as people here in the greater Joplin area, and especially as people of faith. But this morning, we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit different. Last week, we had a show where we were talking about different approaches to things. And today, we're going to have a guest with us who was struggling physically, and she found something that made a difference in her life that basically, as she said to me as we were preparing for the show, that kind of gave her her whole life back. And so we're going to talk about that experience. And so we're going to be right back with Alice Mangan, who is a registered nurse and a veteran living here in our area. And she's going to be talking about how the use of CBD oil, not marijuana, but CBD oil, has been so beneficial for her in her life. So again, some of you may, believers, not believers, whatever, we're going to hear somebody else's experience this morning, as is so often our case. So settle in. We'll be right back after this Mercy Minute, so don't go away.
I have arthritis in my knees, and it was just excruciating. I wish I would have done something sooner. I found myself not able to go up and down stairs, which is bad because we realized we were going to have to sell our house. We decided just to take the worst one first, and we did. I was back to work in 6 weeks. 6 months later, I had surgery on the second one, and I'm back to work in 5 weeks. And I was a little scared, a little apprehensive, even though I knew everything that was going to happen. But I was just impressed. Life is short, and I waited. I think I waited too long.
Well, again, thanks for joining us this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Alice Mangan. And Alice, first, I know you're a nurse and I know you're a veteran. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk a little bit about your journey.
Okay. I'm a registered nurse. I no longer practice at the hospital. I have my own business and do that from 2 locations, plus on the internet, and a little bit about my journey.
Yeah, I'm just saying this. So we were talking earlier in the other room. So how long have you been in the Joplin area?
So we've lived here since 2001 in Webb City.
Okay.
I've recently moved from Webb City, but Webb City, Joplin area, 2001.
Right. Super.
Yep.
Family?
I grew up in Parsons, Kansas before I joined the military. I had family here in Joplin and Pittsburgh in the area, so
Sure.
After the military we came back this direction.
Settled here. Well, good. Well, good. So you were talking before we started, and I was hearing some of your story about you were getting to the point where your physical ailments, which they couldn't figure out for a while, were starting to really get you down. So tell us a little bit what was happening in your life.
After I got out of the military, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, and generalized anxiety. I had small children at home. I had a death in the family, a dependent mother, plus other, things that made sense why it would be depression and things like that. But they accumulated. So even though I made it through nursing school, went on to become a nurse, I was a nurse aide, med tech, all of that stuff, in the medical field basically for 15 to 20 years before I got diagnosed with MS, and that really just took me out of the works. Okay. That happened in about 2009. I went on FMLA from working CBICU, found that I had MS, thought I could go back to work even if it was just part-time, and that didn't pan out so well either. I wound up having to call in a lot because the medications contributed to more disability. And over the years, I became pretty much in the bed most of the time, in the bed, on the couch. And there was a lot of times that I didn't even get to drive. I started having seizures in 2014. By 2015, I was pretty ready to give up. I could have all the opiates, all the injections that I wanted for this, but they didn't help and they didn't contribute to abilities. Instead, I gained more disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, when they start giving you opiates,
Absolutely.
I mean, they know that's when those moments when they don't know what to do for you, and they're just trying to make you comfortable.
Right.
And sometimes it just makes the situation worse, obviously.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that have genetic mutations that we're starting to learn about, epigenetics. So that was something that had showed up in my family, and maybe a reason why opiates didn't seem to even help with my pain. They offered a distraction. I got itching. I got tightness of my chest. I started feeling like my throat was closing off. So now it's not just a distraction, it was something that could be life-threatening. So opiates were a way for me. I had tried a lot of the ibuprofen and Advil and stuff like that before ever advancing to opiates. This was, over a period of 15
Well, you
years.
were doing this with the doctor's care. I mean, obviously they were trying to figure out what was wrong.
Absolutely. And I was a nurse, and I had been, taught at the time that opiates, don't lead to addiction if you use them as prescribed. That the addiction potential is pretty low if you just use them as the doctor, says. And I couldn't even hardly use them, daily.
It sounded like, I was going to say, so
I was just left
the addiction
to
wasn't the problem.
There wasn't a problem that I was going to get addicted.
Anyway, right?
I had to basically avoid them. So by 2015, 2016, like I said, everything had started really culminating into what was going to be desperation. I had started watching something on TV. It was a Sanjay Gupta CNN documentary on cannabis and CBD. And I learned about a little girl that was using CBD for seizures, or high CBD strains for seizures, and thought, wow, maybe it could be medicine. I still didn't really give it a lot of thought until about 2 years later, when I was invited to go with 21 other veterans from the state of Missouri out to Colorado to look at cannabis as medicine. They chose 22 to take out as the pilot group, and I got to be part of them. We went to Colorado. We got to use it recreationally if we chose to. Of course, I was going out there to study the benefits of it. As a nurse with a nursing background, I wanted to see the science, and we got to learn about the science from the researchers that were actually studying this on behalf of the U.S. government in Israel in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
All right, so let's talk about this a little bit, because a lot of people are listening to this going and say, Father Jay's on TV telling people it's okay to use marijuana. And that's what they're hearing, okay?
Sure.
So I
We
want to
wanna
make sure
clarify.
that we get all that straight. So there's a difference between what people would just smoke recreationally and what people have been using in terms of medical research. And we're talking about, in some ways, different creatures from the same stuff, right?
Sure.
Okay,
So
explain all that for everybody that's viewing us.
So when I went out to learn about cannabis, I learned about cannabis is a plant with lots of molecules. Just like our chicken noodle soup has lots of components to it, the cannabis plant has lots of components, lots of molecules. They have molecules that are called cannabinoids. They have molecules that are called terpenoids. The cannabinoids, just like it sounds like cannabis-like. Those actually bind to receptors that we have in our bodies that are called cannabinoid receptors. We have CB1, CB2. It also works on other receptors that are known in pain, like the TRPV, the TRP receptors. There's the TRPV, the TRPM. All of these different receptors actually respond to the molecules that are in cannabis or in other spices. So when we talked about cannabinoids, those cannabinoids or molecules would be like your CBD, your CBN, your THC isomers, along with tons and tons of other cannabinoids. Those don't have any taste, they don't have any color, they don't have any smell. They're hard to identify just by looking at it. So when people look at a hemp plant or a marijuana plant, they can't really tell the difference without a test. It smells the same, and the reason why it smells the same and can have a lot of benefits that carry over into the marijuana side of things or just the CBD plant side of things is because those terpenes. Those terpenes or terpenoids are molecules that are in spices and in the cannabis plants, and those actually work in our bodies as well. You've heard of taking clove and putting it on a sore tooth, or using hot peppers in a cream because of it interacting with receptors that help with pain. It's actually the endocannabinoid system and those TRPV or TRPM receptors.
So, in other words, what you're saying, I'm going to get this down to, so you can remember this. I do theology,
please.
I don't do chemistry very well. All right, so what you're basically saying is that these, like other plant-based things, will affect the body in different ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, so so the difference then between these cannabinoids, did I say that right?
Yeah.
See, there you go.
Cannabinoid.
There you go. And what people are smoking necessarily on a Saturday night are they're from the same family, but they're different things and they do different things.
They are the same family, and they could be the same thing. Some people will use medical marijuana that are high in CBD and less on the THC, so they don't get as elevated. But we know that legally we can't use marijuana unless you have a card, and the state of Missouri has provided a pathway. Without going down that route, using CBD products and CBD flowers, you can absolutely smoke the CBD flower. And smoking isn't, at first when I heard about smoking anything, it just sounded horrible because I was already a cigarette smoker. I got off of cigarette smoking with CBD and the like, but the smoking of it isn't dangerous either. The thing is going to like a CBD dispensary, the staff there will be able to help you only get CBD products. You can't get marijuana products in the CBD dispensaries.
Right. Okay.
Right. And so,
yeah. Although those now exist too
absolutely,
in the area, and those kinds
do.
of things. There've been plenty of articles in the paper about what do we have 2 now here and of the marijuana dispensaries.
Right.
But we have several CBD dispensaries.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
So with the CBD, if there's or THC, whatever they're smoking on Saturday night, we may not be able to call it medical because they didn't get it from dispensary or we haven't researched that particular product, but there's going to be medical benefits out of whatever they're smoking off of the ditch, literally, because it still has the cannabinoid content. And THC is actually made in our bodies. We actually make a molecule called anandamide, and when we are deficient in that, we see things like depression, chronic pain, or there's actually a clinical endogenous cannabinoid deficiency where you see kind of a trifecta where you see women with chronic pain, IBS, and maybe migraines, or that's it, those 3 things. We see a lot of females over the age of 30 with something that seems like in different body parts, but they all have one thing in common, and that's the endocannabinoid system.
The body is an amazing thing, and I keep getting more and more fascinated through the years as people find out these interconnected pieces, that happen to occur that way. And again, I just say, it's a beauty that people are continuing to do research because they're beginning to figure out that some of these things are connected that would seem to not have any connection. Mm-hmm. So in your own experience, when you went out to Colorado and you started to learn more from the folks that have been doing all this research, okay, how then did that affect your life?
So while I was out there, I already couldn't use opiates and have pain relief because of the side effects.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I also had GI issues that would cause, I couldn't eat cheese, I couldn't eat dairy, I couldn't eat gluten. I was able to eat pretty much anything I wanted out there while I was using the cannabis products out there. And all of the cannabis products were not just to get high on, and most people didn't even know I was using them, because when they would ask me about, hey, have I tried this or tried that, I'm like, I'm good, and they're like, well, you can use it out here. I'm like, I am, but I would use it in what was called microdoses, so in such small amounts that it didn't cause an elevation of it didn't cause the high, but it caused the relief in the body and the relief in the stomach and the relief in my shoulders and maybe a little bit of relief in my mind, because when you have chronic pain, you worry about how long am I going to have to sit, and what's the chair's going to be like that I'm sitting in. Am I going to have to stand for any length of time? Those things keep you at home when you have chronic pain. It's a lot of worry. It's a lot of fear.
Well, we're going to take a real quick break. We're going to be right back after a quick break, and we're going to be back to talk a little bit more after this break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Okay, so again, my guest this morning, Alice Mangan, who's a local, kind of a retired nurse and a veteran, who's talking about her own experience of learning to use CBD oil in her life And right before the break, we were talking about the fact that, when you were learning how to use it for you, you weren't using it for the highs or anything, but you were using it, as you said, in those microdoses that would provide for you the relief, some of that stuff that you were looking for that the doctors hadn't been able to find the relief for you with the traditional medicines or things that they were using at that point in time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
did your doctor become a believer too?
Absolutely. It took about 3 years for my veteran doctor my VA doctor, my neurologist, to become a believer. During the next 3 years, from 2017 until the end of 2019, right before my 2020 MRI, she followed my progress. She kept saying, I don't think you should use things that aren't FDA approved. I don't think you should use things that have no medicinal value. But every 6 months for my checkups, she started saying, you don't have the Palmer drift anymore. You don't have the Babinski reflex. These were all neurological deficits that started disappearing one by one. And then once they looked at my MRI, she started comparing my MRIs from previous years to those next 3 years, where she said, I'm going to start following you every 6 months if you're going to start doing these crazy things. And she kept saying every time, it looks like you're doing better. It looks like you're gaining. It looks like these things are starting to disappear. And then by the end, I actually had my son go in to hear it too. And she just put her hands on her hands and said, okay, I think I might believe now. In 2020, when I went and got my next follow-up MRI in March, all of the plaques had reversed on my brain. The plaques were gone, and the one that was left in 2017 when she had went over, or 2018 when she had went over my MRI, she said that plaque was probably from trying to use opiates earlier in my diagnosis, and that sometimes the opiates plaques don't go away, but MS plaques weren't supposed to either. By 2020, they were all gone. I used cannabis, mostly CBD for the majority of my healing. And then I used a lot of the THC with my medical card since then, along with nerve growth factor from lion's mane mushrooms.
There you go.
There you go.
It's interesting. I don't know whether anybody knows this, that I don't know if I've ever referred to it on TV. My brother was a homeopathic physician and a chiropractor. And so he believed in trying other, because he basically just said that, it was very practical, because like, say if somebody came in and had a sinus infection, he'd say, go see your MD, you've got a sinus infection and there's no sense in us doing all this other stuff until you can get rid of the sinus infection. Go do that first and then come back and then we'll work on trying to keep you well, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Okay. Because he was a very practical kind of a guy. And he liked to work hand in hand with the other doctors, the doctors that would want to work with him. But he was a big one of saying, sometimes, the alternative, some of these alternative approaches, even though, they may not receive, the approbation or the acclaim of some of the parts of the medical community, sometimes some of the stuff does stuff that we have no idea how or why it happens. And that's kind of like what your doctor was saying to you.
Right. Right.
Just like, we don't know why it's happening, we don't know why it's working, but all this stuff seems to be better.
And that's what she said. She said, just keep doing what you're doing. I can't really argue with it now.
Yeah.
And, CBD itself, they call it non-psychoactive, but truly it does have a psychoactive effect. It's not psychedelic, it's not psycho-inebriating, but it does have a psychoactive effect, no different than if you wanted to take an antidepressant and you want it to act on the psyche and it lifts your depression, then CBD would be considered psychoactive. A lot of people are scared of the THC because of the high, and there's ways to use all of these products without ever using the THC if you don't want to, because of those other terpenes having medical benefits with them. The great thing is CBD doesn't have an addiction potential. It is actually the anti-addiction. And even we have seen it get people off of a lot of medications and even off of heroin. And I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not say, but my sister would even, so I was willing to use THC and be illegally healed if I had to be. I didn't have to be, thankfully, but I was willing to be. My sister was in a state that she...
Well, you don't have to worry about it now. So
exactly.
Okay. But at any rate,
exactly.
Yes. So I don't think you're going to be in too much trouble for saying what you said.
Yeah, I think it's more than 3 years now. It's after out of the statute. But my sister, she had a car accident. She was on opiates as well. She also had chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, MS, a whole slew of things. And the CBD is what we used to get her off of things because she couldn't risk using THC at that time.
Yeah.
And so even if she could have used THC, we know that it only has an addiction potential of like 10%. 1 in every 10 of marijuana users, as reported by the CDC, may become addicted, compared to 21 or 29% of people that use opiates.
Well, I mean, that's why doctors don't want to give people opiates if they can avoid it.
Right.
I mean, that's why, because they know that what it can do to people.
Right. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, that's the only tool doctors had in their toolbox. Now I'm hoping that they start looking at something like CBD, BCP, beta-caryophyllene. These things are being used by doctors already. And I get a lot of referrals, but I'm hoping that more get interested if they want to learn about the cannabinoid receptors in the body. What's the CB1 receptor do? What's the CB2 receptors do? And how can we use those receptors to help benefit our body, to help bless our bodies, instead of, using the things that maybe aren't so helpful.
Yeah. Well, and again, like I say, at one point in time, antibiotics were seen as out there, and now they're an accepted use, generally, across the board.
Right.
The same thing is true, when, people would, use, this thing or this home remedy. Some of those things have been proven true. Now, others, nobody can seem to prove, and,
Sure.
and it is what it is. And again, I don't want to get into the, the big fights between the different groups and what they do, because that's just, I don't like to fight, especially on a Sunday morning,
Right.
But I am going to say that I do hope that they continue to explore some of those things, and especially when some of them seem to have had such, such good benefit for so many people.
Right.
And again, I don't know. I mean, I've just noticed that yes, maybe you can address this for me. But I mean, obviously, you see more CBD dispensaries. You see more people recommending it. You see, now, granted, some of the claims seem to cure everything from this, that, to the other thing. And and I'm sure that I don't want to overplay it. I don't want to underplay
Right.
it. I mean, so I don't want to just go, oh, that's ridiculous, because I don't know.
Sure.
But at the same time, I know that I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to do things, under the guidance of somebody who knows what they're doing. I certainly probably wouldn't do that without checking with my own doctor.
Good.
And see what the doctor would say, about doing something. Of course, I don't really know that I've got anything that I would need to justify using it for. But
Sure.
As we learn more and more, it's going to be interesting to see what people discover and what works, because for a long time we weren't allowed to even experiment or try any of it.
Correct. And that kind of gave a little bit of a disservice to the people that could have been using CBD all along, especially when the U.S. government has a patent on it for things like stroke and neuroprotection. The military is now starting to investigate it for CTE, TBIs, PTSD. That's why myself and 21 other veterans went out to
Right.
Colorado, was to look at it for things like PTSD and chronic pain, because we do have research and it's all in PubMed. And now we have things like Go Ask Alice RN. That'll be an app coming out that we're releasing, where you can work with doctors and nurses and have a healthcare team kind of working all together, so that it's part of your therapy, not your only therapy.
Exactly, and that's what I think is smart. I mean, I think it's great that some of the folks in the medical community are trying to say, okay, let's find out where this might lead. Let's find out, what we do here, and try to figure out some way of kind of bringing those communities together, those who might have been a little bit more experimental, but those who are also, wanting to make sure that things are vetted and safe and
Yes.
all those kinds of things. Because I wouldn't want to do that without checking with my own medical, providers to see what their experience has told them too.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of experiences with our providers, unfortunately, but there are niches and nooks of cannabis providers. The American Cannabis Nurses Association has been around for 15 years. You probably haven't heard of it because you're not a nurse and you're not into cannabis, but those that are moving in those fields are seeing it. Are seeing these organizations come together. You can get CMEs and CEUs. Doctors can go and take these classes to get educated, because this anatomical and physiological structure was never shared in a lot of textbooks.
Right. And especially at the time when some of them were in
At
school
the
and things like that. I mean, obviously
correct.
the research is, continues to move forward at a much rapider pace because, I mean, obviously we're seeing, that's what I'm saying. I mean, anybody that would said, CBD oil, I mean, you can't open up a magazine, you can't open up, anything anymore that doesn't at least, tout at least some of what somebody's trying to sell you as the benefit.
Right.
And again, I'll just be real honest. I mean, in having the conversation, I mean, that's made me a little suspicious because
Yeah.
I'm like, if it does everything, and if it did it all the time, why wouldn't we be doing that? But I'm also not a skeptic on the far other end that says, obviously, some people have had some benefits from some of these things, or it wouldn't, be helping some people move forward, with certain things,
Yeah.
So now, how do we study it? How do we, make sure it's going well? How do we make sure everybody's protected? Those kinds of things, and I think that's important.
Yep, there's research going out there, and we are getting to study it in all of these states now. Missouri will be the first state to probably study it in cannabis in veterans.
Good. Well, and I'm glad. I'm glad you were part of that group.
Yeah.
I'm glad you went and did that. Again, my guest this morning has been Alice Mangan. She is a local, she's one of our local veterans and also a nurse, formerly by trade. She's been with us this morning giving her own experience about CBD and cannabis. And so we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute.
Blessings and greetings of Mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of Mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living Mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
I told my guest when we started today, it's just like, okay, this is going to be like out there for some people, but I really do think it's important that we continue to listen to each other's experiences and listen to what has worked. Sometimes traditional medicine, we all know somebody that for traditional medicine has just not worked, and we haven't been able to figure out the way, and that's why they call it an art rather than a science, because even the doctors get stymied from time to time. In other instances and in other directions, somebody can use something that might be considered an alternative therapy, and all of a sudden that person manages to not only not get worse, but suddenly start improving. Alice Mangan, our guest today, was one of the proof positive of those things. So again, just broadening our way of looking at the world and how things might be healed. Stay open, continue to consult your health providers. Come back and join us next Sunday for Faith in Our Hometown. God bless. Happy Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.